Hi, so welcome back. This is the third in a series of mixing tutorials aimed to take you through mixing a project from start to finish, especially if there's a few gaps in your knowledge and you're not too sure how to go about the mixing process. In the first video, we looked at how to just label things up and get things ready to start to process, and we explained what was on there here and what we're looking at in terms of mixing. And we looked a little bit at amp modelers as well. In the second video, we looked at preparing each individual channel. So we took the guitar clean channel in the middle here, and we after the amp modelers, if you're using any DI'd or any guitars or anything like that that need any amp modelers, we looked at channel EQ, and we looked at compression, and we looked at reverb, which are going to be the three main things that you're going to use on any mix. Now, in the intervening time between the second video and this video, what I've done is I've gone through every channel and I've tried to process them so they each individually sound pretty nice. You'll notice that I mentioned it before, EQ, you don't need EQ on every channel. If you recorded something properly in the first place, you might not need to touch your EQ at all. And what I've done to show you the truth of that is I've actually hardly put any EQ on anything. I've put a bit of EQ on a kick drum, I've put a little bit of EQ on your snare, but you don't necessarily need to put EQ. If you want to put EQ on, if you think that channel needs a little bit of a lift, or there's some problem frequencies that you need to cut a little bit, then go for the EQ, try and get it sounding as good as possible. But you don't absolutely need to put it on. The thing you do need to put on every channel is compression. You notice that all of these channels say comp on them, and it's a really good place to start off when you're mixing, is to make sure everything is compressed nicely. Like I said before, you can use some presets in terms of getting some compression settings. Hopefully the more you mix and the more you watch videos and read about things, you'll learn what each of these individual parts of the compressor does. But in the meantime, presets are really your friend when you're first starting out. We put a reverb on a bus channel over here, and you'll notice that every instrument is sending a little bit of signal here, so every instrument is going to have reverb on it apart from the bass and the kick drum over here. And like I said before, if you start sticking reverb on bass instruments, it gets really muddy really quickly. And the only other thing I've done in terms of prepping things is you'll see the overheads left and right. I've panned the overheads halfway left and the overheads halfway right. And if that doesn't make that much sense to you, what it is basically because the left and right overheads are recorded a distance apart on the kit, you want to spread those microphones out to give you a nice stereo image of that drum kit. Sometimes if you pan it all the way left and all the way right, you can end up with a slight hole in the middle of your stereo mix, and it sounds as if you split your drums too far wide left and right. So a good starting position is to go halfway left and halfway right, and you should sound pretty nice with your overheads. So you've got everything individually sorted. How do you create a nice balance with your mix? Because everything is set at 0 at the moment. Now, the way I would go about this, and there's many different people go about it in many different ways, I'm going to explain the way that I like to go about putting a mix together. Usually I'd start off with my drums, and if you want some extra help with mixing your drums, I have got a couple of videos on mixing drums that go into a lot more detail on each bit of that process. So if you want to, the link is in the description down the bottom, so you go and watch that mixing drums tutorial. But we're going to start off with our drums here, and you'll notice that I literally just took down every single fader at the bottom here. In fact, let's just take them all down actually. I'm going to start off with our overheads, and the reason we're going to start off with our overheads is because they are the most important part of our drum kit. They are the overall stereo recording of our drums that usually have every piece of information on there. There's the cymbals, there's the toms, the snare and the kick, and that is going to be the loudest part of our drums. So let's just have a quick listen. So the first thing you can see is that now we've compressed it, is that these are clipping here. They're going into the red. That is bad. So what we want to do is take these and we want to just drag them down a little bit. The other thing you should notice is this right one was a little bit louder than this left one because of the way they've recorded it. And you can even see that goes to minus 8.8 and that goes to minus 6.8. So what I'm going to do is just take this right one down a little bit. So these overheads do not need to be the same volume if there's a little bit of problem with the recording itself, like one channel is louder than the other. Yes, that sounded pretty nice. And then the aim with the drums is I introduced enough reverb just to soften them up a bit and sound like they're in a room. But what we're going to be doing is introducing these spot mics just to bring out different parts of the kit. So we're not starting with our kick drum up here and our snares up here and blending in our overheads. We're actually starting with our overheads and we're just blending in as much of these individual spot mics as we need. So let's just have a listen, and I'm going to slowly bring these in one by one. These toms I might need to zip towards the end just to hear where they come in, and then we're hopefully going to have a nice balanced drum kit by the end of this. So literally in a 30-second little mix, that sounds all right actually. Obviously in real life I would spend a lot longer processing these drums and trying to get a real nice balance, but in terms of like something quick that's working, that sounds pretty nice. You can hear your overheads there, all of these spot mics are coming through now, and they're really bringing out those individual parts of the kit that are slightly missing in the overheads there. So that's the easiest bit, is to, like, getting your drums sounding really nice on their own. The tricky thing is to blend things in together, and what I like to do is I like to blend instruments one by one. So when I've got my drums sounding really nice, I'd reach for my bass as the other part of the rhythm section, and I'd try and turn that up so it just sits nicely with the drums. Let's try that now. Yeah, I'm happy with that for the time being. So that's kind of sitting nicely with our drums. And the way of doing this like this is that it's much easier than having all your faders set as 0 and having to balance everything while everything is playing on top of one another. I find it much easier to introduce instruments one by one. So the next thing I'm going to do is introduce my clean guitar here, and again I'm just going to turn it up just enough so that it balances really nicely with my drums and my bass. Let's try that. Yeah, that's sounding really nice. And just to say, if there's anything wrong with these individual channels themselves, anything you've done on them, you can fix them at this stage. You don't have to, because I've set that as the channel strip there, this is not set in stone. I can go and change the reverb settings. If I don't like the way that the EQ on the guitar works with the bass and they're getting in the way of each other with the bass frequencies, I can go back and EQ any of these things. But that sounding pretty nice. I'm going to zip to the chorus here. Is that the chorus? Let's just have a look. Here we are. I'm going to try and blend in the other guitar. And I'm actually just going to go back to that little bit from the transition just to make sure those guitars sound pretty similar in volume, because you don't want a huge volume spike between one section of a song and another. And lastly, we're just going to have a look at this guitar at the end here, this solo guitar. Oh, I do apologise for that. My computer didn't like that for some reason. Lovely. What you can do as well is that this doesn't really happen in this track because one guitar leads into the other. But if you have multiple guitar takes that are playing at the same time, that's also another really good thing to pan left and right. So it's usually a good rule of thumb. I usually keep most things in the middle and tell my students to keep most things in the middle, apart from your overheads, pan them left and right, and any mid-frequency instruments that are playing at the same time. So if you've got multiple guitars playing chords at the same time, you might want to pan them one left and one right. If they're playing a solo and the chords at the same time, you won't want to keep them in the middle together. It's up to you. So we've got all that sounding quite nice. The only last thing that we're missing really is the vocals. So let's do the same thing with the vocals. And that's sounding pretty nice, to be honest. I'm really happy with how that's sitting. Where you want your mix is bring them in one by one. Get them balanced by themselves. If you need to go and change things, so by the time you brought the vocals in, if it turns out the guitars you think are too loud, then go back to your guitars and just turn them down a little bit. But I'm really happy about the way that that's balanced there. And the trick that you want is you want everything to be present in your mix. So you can hear everything in your mix and nothing is popping out of your mix too much, nothing's getting in your face, and you're not having to strain to hear anything. So you're not having to strain to hear the bass. It's there, but it's not really in your face. The drums, you can hear each bit of the drums. You don't have to strain your ears to hear them, but they're not popping out. The only things that should be slightly loud and other things in your mix are your lead vocals, because they're the most important bit of your song. And usually people have their snare just a tiny bit louder, just because that's the main thing that keeps the time in the track. But apart from that, this is a really nice balance. Let's go to the chorus and see if we can balance these backing vocals in here as well. And the other thing just to bear in mind is that, say, in that chorus, those lead vocals are just a little bit too quiet for me. So what you can actually do is, don't forget that every music making piece of software has automation. In Logic, you can get that automation if you press A. And what I might do in this chorus bit, what you can actually do is just draw a little dot there. Draw a little dot there, and then just take it up by a few dB in the chorus, and at the end of the chorus just take it down by a few dB again. Where's that one? Minus 8.2. There you go, so he gets a little lift when he gets to the chorus. Let's have a listen. And the other thing that you may notice I've done between these two vocals is I've put slightly more reverb on the backing vocals than I have on the main vocals. And that's a really good technique for dropping things back in the mix, because your main vocals are the ones that you want really up front, and the backing vocals, I just want them to sit a little bit behind them, so I just added a little bit more reverb. Let's just have a listen to the harmony vocals towards the end. In the middle here.
I love the season new year. No, I wouldn't talk down to you. I had to tell you just how I feel. I won't share you with another boy. No, I know my mind is made up. So put away your makeup. Told you once, I won't tell you again. It's a bad way.
Oh, really lovely backing vocals there. I really love them. So you can get them sitting really nicely so they kind of glue together with your vocals there. Again, you might want to add like a slightly touch more reverb than the other ones. But basically, that's how to create a basic mix from start to finish. It's not usually as hard as people think. The problem is that knowing what order to put these on, knowing how to put your reverb on the bus, it's really kind of technical. And the only other thing I just wanted to recap is just that don't forget what I said in one of the earlier videos, which is make sure that all these tracks, none of them are clipping on the individual tracks themselves. And more importantly, when you add them all together, nothing is clipping on your main output. And don't forget, you can always draw a box around it, and you can drag down all your faders up or down at the same time. And the other thing is you can always just grab your output fader here. But I'm pretty happy with that. Sounds pretty nice little mix. The next stage in your mixing process, because you might just want to bounce that down there, the next process that you're going to do after this is mastering. And I know that mastering is a whole other ballpark. If you want, there is another little video that I'll link to at the end of this that takes you through the mastering process. And what the mastering process is, if you didn't know what that is, it's the final stage before you can bounce down and say that your track is finished. Because at the moment, our fader here is set down here, and we basically want to add a couple of effects on our master fader here, our master output, in order to get it ready to bounce down. Now, again, if you don't really know what that stage is, or you've never even heard of mastering, and you're thinking, what is this magical thing that I'm being told about right now, then go and check the really quick mastering crash course that I've got. Again, it's aimed the same way as this one is, which is to get you on your feet as soon as possible. Obviously, you can get specced up and get a lot better at it in future. But if you need something to work on right now, go and watch that video. But apart from that, hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you know how to do a mix now. Thanks. Bye. Thanks.